Assalamu alaikum. Welcome in today's class. Our lesson today is the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, or in the book it is mentioned as the dawn of the Industrial Age. It is chapter 7, section number 1. You can reach your lesson on page number 246 of your student book. The objective of the lesson is that student must be able to analyze why life changed as industry spread. Student must be able to summarize how an agricultural revolution led to the growth of industry, and you must be able to outline the new technologies that helped to start, or that you can say that helped to trigger the industrial revolution. Some of the terms mentioned in the lesson are, for example, enclosure. It's a process of taking over and consolidating land previously shared by peasant farmers. Now that land enclosure was the property of one guy, one person. It was held by a landlord, you can say. Smelting is it's a process of separating iron from its ore, invented by Abraham Darby. James Watt was a Scottish engineer who improved the efficiency of a steam engine, making it a key source of power during the Industrial Revolution. Anesthesia, it's a kind of a drug that is used during the surgery, and it prevents the pain to the patient. Now, our first question is that what events helped bring about the Industrial Revolution? For thousands of years following the rise of the civilization in the past, most people they lived and worked in the small farming villages. Life almost remained same, although it was much more different than the Paleolithic age. But since the beginning of civilization, the pattern of life remained almost the same. It was an agricultural societies around the world. The basic income was based on the agricultural product. The business, although it involved many other services, but it was mainly revolved around the production, which was based in the rural areas. However, people, majority of them, they lived in the villages, not in the cities. Although there were cities, but cities were usually the trading points, production points. Production sources was only in the villages. So majority of the people, those who were associated with production, they lived in the villages. However, some events in the 1700s, mid of the 18th century, uh, it changed the life as compared to the past. So basically, this period after the mid 1700 onward, it is called an industrial revolution, which spread and which eventually, even today, it is spreading around the world. Some nations today are yet to be industrialized. They are still agricultural societies, although they have plenty of industries, but their major mode of income is agricultural sources. So some countries today are highly industrialized and some countries are yet to be industrialized. But industrial revolution actually started from mid 18th century. So this slide tells us that how industrial revolution started and spread to other parts of the world. You must know that the first country to industrialize was Britain, and then next country to industrialize following Britain was Belgium. What is industrialization actually? Basically, industrialization means to employ machinery in the production methods. So employing of machines actually allowed the businessmen to produce more by utilizing less number of people, reducing the expenses. It means that once the expenses reduced, the output increased and its prices also decreased. Why? Because less number of people employed mean less expense. So when the expense is lower, it means that businessmen can afford to keep or to sell the commodity or output in lower prices. So industrial revolution actually allowed the businessmen to produce more output by utilizing complex machinery and less manpower. Industrial revolution changed the life pattern of the people, but it changed this life slowly and gradually, not like a political revolution which brought abrupt changes. So industrial revolution was slow and it is expanding and still expanding. Here you can see that what was the life before and after the Industrial Revolution. By comparing the two, you can clearly see that before the Industrial Revolution, yani before 1750, people they lived in the rural areas, the villages. They worked in the lands. They followed the traditional way of production. They grew very small quantity of food, so it was a subsistence farming. Whatever they grew, they sold in the local markets. So they consumed whatever they produce within a small locality. So people they traveled by foot, horse, or sailed by the boat. These were the traditional ways of traveling. But once the industrialization took place, modern machines took over. The output increased. Machines were employed in the industries, so people they left the farming communities and they migrated to the cities in order to get work in the industries or you can say factories. So they produced more. It was produced in bulk quantities. It became cheaper, so people could buy more, people could eat more, people could have better clothes. So as a result, the life pattern changed. Once they could buy more, once they could eat more, they had a better health. There was less famine. So people also had modern ways of traveling. They had cars, they had steam engines, they could travel by trains, so they could travel faster. The roots of this change is actually in Netherlands and Britain. Basically, Industrial Revolution has its own root in Agricultural Revolution. And Agricultural Revolution started from Netherlands, the Dutch. Basically, what happened here that the Dutch people they started or they learned how to save the land from the loss that was happening every year. The land was taken away by the ocean waves, so they learned the techniques to save the land. They started to build dikes. They started to erect some walls in front of the ocean waves. Ocean waves brought some sand with them, and this sand was actually accumulated behind the dikes. So ultimately, they started to reclaim the land. Um, they also improved the agricultural production by utilizing modern, you can say, procedures or modern methods. They experimented with modern fertilizers, you can say natural fertilizers, particularly the fertilizers that was produced from livestock, brown fertilizer it is. So these experiments were done by the Dutch and British. They worked on improving these experiments. For example, the Jethro tull was invented, which planted the seeds in a row instead of throwing them or spreading them, scattering them here and there, which ultimately wasted so many seeds. So Jethro tull was used to cultivate the land and plowing the seeds into one line. Similarly, the British experimented in rotating the crops. In one season, they cultivated a different crop, and in the next season, they cultivated a different crop, which not only helped them to have more yields, but also to save the production capability of the soil. So this is how the agriculture revolution actually sparked, or you can say it was behind the industrial revolution, which ultimately changed the entire life pattern of the human beings. One of the major techniques that was utilized in improving the output of the farms or output of the soil was to change the small farmlands to convert them into big farmlands. Once the big farmland was owned by a single guy, he utilized less number of people in the farm and they produced more as compared to the small output, because small farmland was usually utilized for subsistence farming. Whatever the small peasants produced, they consumed by themselves. They had sheep pastures, so they did not produce as compared to the bigger enclosure. So establishment of enclosure allowed the opportunity to increase the output of the land, as because the landowner employed less number of farmers and they were you can say forced by the circumstances to work. and to produce more as compared to the past. So if in one side this kind of experiment allowed the production from soil to increase on a bigger level, but at the same time it had negative impacts. For example, those farmers who were previously holding their own lands, now they lost those lands to the bigger farmers, and they were jobless, or you can say they were without the land. So ultimately they moved to the cities. So the larger farms were capable of producing more food with the use of by utilizing less labor or less human power. Just as I explained in the previous slide, that farm enclosure system actually threw some of the farmers out of the land. So they had no land of their own. So ultimately, to find some work, to find income, they had to move to the factories or to the industries in the cities. So these people, they actually filled up many of the jobs in the cities, which helped actually industry owners to find cheaper labor, because these farmers, they were not skilled, they were not that much educated, so their energy or their strength could be utilized by compensating them with little money and getting more output from the machines. So these laborers actually filled up the jobs in the industries because they were unable to find the land to work. So they migrated into the cities. Agricultural revolution contributed to the population explosion in Europe because people could produce more, they could eat more, so there were less chance of famine. There was no hunger. They eat better. The quality of food improved also. Because of the better quality of food, their health also improved. Because at the same time, health section or health sector of the social life was also going through transformation. There were more discoveries, there were more inventions. The doctors, they were able to treat more diseases. As a result, improvements in the hygiene actually, or you can say sanitation or medical care system, reduced the deaths in the society, which actually contributed in the other side in exploding the population in Europe. You can see here that early 1700 British had a 5 million population, but 1800s, the start of the 19th century, they had 9 million population. Europe overall population was 120 million in 1700s, and it increased to 180 million at the end of the 17th 18th century. So you can see that all because of this was possible due to advances in technology, advances in agricultural production systems. So people had better food, people had more food, so they became healthy. As a result, the population exploded. The inventions in new technology actually helped trigger many other changes. For example, Abraham Darby, he found a technique to smelt iron by using coal instead of charcoal. The output in this technique was much more effective in terms of quality and very less expensive as compared to the past. So once the iron was produced on a large scale, or you can say high scale, it allowed the governments to build more roads, to build more bridges, to connect people, to build high-rise buildings, and even high quality, or you can say better quality machines as compared to the past, because the iron was in terms of quality much better than the previous technology or previous techniques. So this is one of the way the changes triggered by technology actually contributed in bringing new inventions or new techniques into the society. New inventions in terms of energy production also contributed in industrial revolution. For example, James Watt actually he invented his engine, which was more efficient as compared to the steam engine invented by Thomas Newcomen in 1712. The engine that Thomas Newcomen invented was used to pump the water out of the mines, but the engine of James Watt was source of energy for many bigger machines. It became the backbone of modern factories, trains, and the ships. So the people could have more power as compared to the past. They could run bigger machines. This actually allowed them to utilize these bigger machines in performing bigger tasks. So having mastery over production of energy actually allowed them to utilize bigger level machines or bigger scale machines in order to have bigger level projects completed with the help of machines. For example, mining, for example, building roads, building high-rise buildings. So these kinds of actually projects were undertaken by utilizing modern machinery, which were considered once in the previous times were considered highly impossible or highly difficult to attain. So actually, it was thanks to the mastery of having control over energy system, all these things became possible. The century following the start of Industrial Revolution witnessed the inventions that actually revolutionized or that impacted the human's life on a grand scale. For example, anesthesia was a kind of medicine that gave the doctors an opportunity to conduct long duration surgeries related to bones, surgeries related to intestines. So these surgeries became possible just because anesthesia made the patients and their body numb during the procedure time. Telegraph was one of the best invention in field of communications. It revolutionized the human life because it brought distant communities in contact with each other without having the need of traveling. So they could communicate, they could exchange their ideas or their views without having the need to physically travel to that place. Sewing machine actually created an opportunity to produce the clothing on a mass level or on a mass scale, which ultimately brought the prices of the clothing on a lower level and people could purchase as compared to the past. So once prices were down, more people purchased more clothes. As a result, economic activity increased. Antiseptics were a kind of medicine that actually stopped the spread of infection. In the past, many of the diseases spread just because of the infection. People they visited the hospitals to get their disease treated, and when they came back, they had a new disease in their body. So just because in the hospitals there were no modern procedures, no modern methods of sanitation, or you can say sterilization of equipment, so antiseptics actually helped them to stop the spread of infections. These were some of the inventions of the early industrialization period, which actually revolutionized the human life on a global scale. I hope you will be able to understand the topic. Even if still you feel that you are stuck with any point, you can come back with your question in the Schoology, or we can meet in our Zoom class. We can discuss everything in detail. Until then, see you next time.